Okay, good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? Energy level still there, 4:45, last session? All right, I'm John Galante. I am president of AD Ventures, and I am honored to be moderating this panel today. Our topic is taking interactive services for the light commercial market. And this is our plan for this session and our presenters as well. So I'm going to give a very brief intro, including the names of our panelists. After my intro, I'll turn it over to John Loud, who's the president of Loud Security in Kennesaw, Georgia, the Atlanta area. And I've known John since about 2006. I think he exhibited in the Southern Builder Show when we tried to do a technology event for builders back in 2006 and 2007. He's also your president of Georgia BFAA.
They tricked me a few years ago.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
For GELSA, Georgia Electronic Life Safety Security Association.
He's got a very successful operation in the Atlanta area and has been doing a lot in the interactive services area. John's going to give us an integrator's perspective to kick things off. Then there's 3 or 4 buckets that we really wanted to look at from a product and technology standpoint. One of them is door control. Right, door control is part of your interactive services play in the residential side of things, but it's not like traditional access control. And the doors that you encounter in the light commercial environment are different than the doors that you see in the residence. So Peter Borskin from Assa Abloy is going to take us through some of the door control and access control questions. And then Avi's going to do yeoman's work here with 3 categories. He's going to cover cameras, lighting control, and energy control, all places where he has some experience and familiarity. And Avi is the VP of Security and Control for Linear. So my one slide of intro material is from the 2013 ESA Megatrend Survey. It's kind of the impetus for this session because we really were probing around interactive services in the light commercial market and trying to see what is the interest level and doing more in that regard. And the survey results show us that the interest level is very high. Statement: developing an interactive services offer for light commercial customers is an important business thrust for our company. 52% strongly agree, 37% agree somewhat. We need to learn more about what interactive services product and feature sets will sell well in the light commercial market. 53 strongly agree, 39 agree somewhat. We need to learn more about what kinds of commercial, industrial, and institutional markets will be receptive to interactive services offers. 53 strongly agree, 38% agree somewhat. So there's hunger for information on this. We're going to try to provide you with a good dollop of it today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you, sir. Well, first I'm going to give you guys a little perspective for Loud Security and kind of the evolution, how we've gotten to our space here for a minute. Before I even jump into that slide, we're based out of Atlanta. We've got a lot of competition in the Atlanta marketplace. Had my company just under 20 years. We are 70% on the residential side, 30% on the commercial side. Residentially, we've been heavily involved in the builder market, which was the old terminology of builder back in years ago. We used to deal more with the high-end custom builder, dealt with about 40 to 50 of those types of folks, which one survived through our process of realignment in the economy factor, shall we say. We actually re-entered that space quite aggressively last year as we picked up all the major builders at this time through. You know, those big production builders became much smaller, and we'd grown quite a bit, so scalability, we were able to handle things. So from the D.R. Hortons, John Whelan's, Pulte, Beazer, Home South, Front Porch, it's been quite a bit of different approach last year than what we did probably 5 or 6 years prior to that. And with that, really, I'll step back to this show back in 2010. There's literally been 2 shows in my 18 plus years that I can put my thumb on where I came walking out of that show back to my management team and said, it's a new day, it's a different day coming. And for us, that was, we were up in Pittsburgh 2010, does that sound right?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember walking that floor, and I've done ISC West about every other year. Different shows are our active involvement, and some of you need to be aware. First off, I was a flight attendant for Delta Airlines for 6 years before I ever started this. So I didn't know how any of this equipment worked, okay? So I'm one of those ready to learn and listen and do, as I love some of the major manufacturers have heard me share this, there's a lot of research and development that goes on, and my model has always been about rip off and duplicate. So for me, this session is one of those opportunities for us to share some of those best practices that we've learned from others, or we've fostered and tried some things on our own that you can now take back for yourselves and tweak in some fashion or another. But what really had shown us that particular year was the change in where we had been involved with HAI and some other large-scale automation platforms that we've implemented in a lot of the high-end homes that we had done from a lot of the pro athletes throughout Atlanta. And then we got into some of the commercial aspects. Now, for Loud Security, I actually run more the commercial division. And on our 30%, we deal with things like Turner Field camera systems. We deal with some of the major jewelry stores in town. So we've kind of, and then a lot of different little government enterprises that are there. We don't go out to a normal bid process. That's not the way we go to market at all. So we don't get into the school systems. We don't get into some of that factor. So for us to talk today about light commercial is really everything from that little strip center storefront to some things that become even a little bit larger, and you'll see through some slides here. My examples that we've done at Loud Security kind of is a certain scale. You know, when I saw the different changes in 2010, meaning the affordability factors, you know, an HAI panel is not something that every homeowner or every business owner can really afford to get into the lights, which were certainly manageable back 7, 8, 10 plus years ago, or we didn't have lock options back in those days. Cameras were just starting to come into the picture. But for us, some of the initial things are, I want to have a commercial management tool, or do I want to have a commercial notification tool? And at different times, there's different customers that you're going to get engaged with and have a conversation that you may want to, for us, it's just coming across as that security expert. We may not even have all the solutions, and I'll give you an example. We do not do gas or foam systems, so the FM200 systems, we don't do that. But every IT room I walk into, I look up and I go, oh, wow. And I just start talking about water and their IT equipment, and does that give them a concern? And we kind of come across at times as that, maybe that guiding expert, so we're not here to just sell you all the time. We're here to just make you aware, or have you think through a process that you guys have to be in your readiness, preparedness as to what you guys are going to have for your budget planning. Now, is that budget planning going to be able to say, let's get rid of those sprinkler heads, or is that budget planning going to be someday that water is going to, that zone may go, or a head may rust, or something may happen. And we all know in our business, usually when are they going to take care of that? After something happens, or after they hear of somebody next door. And when you're in some of these large facilities that, you know, you got suite A and suite B and D and E and F, and they don't realize there may be only 3 zones in that whole entire building. Somebody 4 suites over, if their forklift pops that head, or something rusts or something goes on, and it's now Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that water's running, what's happening, and how much damage have they gone through? For the jurisdiction I'm in, some cases they're not even required to monitor the sprinkler flow and tamper. So in a lot of cases for us, that's a lot of the low-hanging easy thing where we get involved with that management company to then be able to take care of those suites, and then it becomes a referral opportunity for each and every one of those suites. And then once we've got that door open, we get in to talk to, depending upon the type of business, whether they need a management tool where some of the automation can help, or is it more about some notification factors. I remember one of my first notification factors was in 1996, where somebody wanted to, we're in Georgia, so we have tornadoes, and somebody wants to get some of those warnings and have an alert system, because at that point in time they had 80 plus employees in about a 45,000 square foot facility. So what can they do to trigger to make a different sound that they know they're under a warning watch, and they go through some practices to do those, you know, those drills. It's not just your normal fire drill, but now let's talk about tornadoes. So there's different factors geographically, I'm sure, that everybody's got to consider. But, you know, one of the things we've started to talk about over the last year, really, actually before I go to the critical alerts, when we started to look at the automation for the more affordable factor, getting rid of the HAI, if you will, to become more available for the masses, I guess it was really 2010. We started to step into it really the latter part of 2011 and into 2012. It was November 2011 is when we said, okay, here's our package, here's our program, here's where we're going to go from the residential as well as the commercial market. And some of you may have been on a call that we were all on recently. And from the first quarter revenues of 2011 to first quarter revenues 2012, similar number of unit sales, our RMR was up by 72%. And that was all because of the automation, the add-ons that we had done to a similar size customer base. So in a blend of both the residential and commercial, it was up significantly. Well, and of course the trend has continued, and we've perfected and found other ways as we get those to be our solid base for the rest of our team to understand or discuss. It was then about how do I identify what your services, what we could possibly have you consider versus somebody else. And it's kind of sometimes in that facility as to what can make sense or what that person's role or position may be. You know, whether we're dealing with the facility manager or the IT person. You know, and there's a different thing to be discussed there. So in some examples, we have somebody that may have a system that we can't go in and take over, but we've got a relationship because we've been referred to them because of cameras. So we're going to go talk about cameras, but at the same time, they're certainly aware that we can monitor their fire, we can monitor a lot of other systems, but they may not be ready to have us change that over. So we come across more as that trained professional. Let's talk about the water. Let's talk about sprinkler flow and tamper. Is that being monitored? Because a lot of people don't look at that, certainly within our marketplace. And then we start talking about emergency alerts. You know, we know about the movie theater shootings. We know about the school shootings. Those are the types of events that nobody ever thinks going to happen in their community. And once that happens, well, now our local police department's actually running around with videos that are on YouTube about the active shooter and doing a lot of training corporately about active shooters. So even though they don't think it may happen there, they're at least opening that up to the business communities, the chambers, the business associations, to let all of those business owners hear that, to let that sink in and just trying to think about, you know, what am I going to do? And some of you may have seen that. I'm not going to, yes.
Get back to your 72% growth in RMR with the same unit sales. So what are the RMR attachments on the interactive services?
Well, and let me try to keep that strictly from the commercial side. You know, 5-7 years ago, we were not hammering away to make sure everybody had cellular or had backup. And because, you know, years prior, residentially, we weren't doing that. If I was primarily a residential company leaning into the commercial and was being dragged into commercial reluctantly, then I realized it was the best thing ever. Because number one, you're profitable from day one. Access control is by far my favorite product of all because we have 4 pieces of recurring revenue. We have management, maintenance, monitoring, and cards. Every year we've got each of those 4 pieces. But so number one, our cellular sales went way up. The next is there's, you know, before we would do some opening closings, but opening closings may have been a management tool but not a notification. So when we were doing a lot of Circuit City stores, you'd have the fail to close or, you know, late to close or late to open, some of those, but those are just little notifications that happen then. But now somebody's going to use it as a management tool. So now I'm going to get more notifications via text or email, whatever they choose, because sometimes it can get to be a little bit too much. But once you got some of that started, and we're talking about if it's just one Zaxby store and then all of a sudden it became 15 or 18 Zaxby stores, and then Menchie's opened up and they put 23 Menchie's little yogurt shops in there. So we started to, and then, you know, the restaurant chain factors could go on a little bit. Thermostats.
What kind of RMR can you add with those notification type services?
For us, we were usually adding about 12, well, it depends on which of the services. So for certain notifications, we were about $12 to $15. Certainly cellular, we're down to only adding $10 from the cellular side to do cellular. I mean, that used to be $15, then it was $12.95. Now it's more to a $10 range from there. Other interactive platforms, you know, it can, depending upon whether we're getting into the cameras or, you know, the average number certainly can end up well up into the 40s and 50s for us. And we have, and I know, especially from the manufacturer rep side, every market's so different. You know, we've got 2 or 3 major players in our marketplace that charge monitoring $16, $18.95. If you add interactive services, they add $5. Actually, if you add cellular, they add $5. If you add interactive services, they only add $5. You know, but that's not our customer. I mean, they're out doing mass marketing and TV and radio and galore. That's, you know, I don't need all the customers. I just need some of the right ones. And in some of the presentations earlier today, it's about building that relationship with them and letting them see that value within the company and that it's not just all that price. And there are many times that if it does come down to it, it's just that price, then we realize we're not that match. So there's folks within my team that have learned. I mean, sure, nobody wants to lose any customer. And I said for $2 to lose them, no, but there's some that we realized, hey, I explained we are a for-profit company. We're not a nonprofit. So the price points have got to make sense, because at the end of the day, you guys want the truck to show up on time and have gas and have somebody that's actually trained and maybe look half decent and done a background check, even though in the state of Georgia we don't require those things. So I don't know if that's some of those areas. Other customer examples, well, we're going to get into a few here in a minute. When you deal with critical alerts, and we've had examples at Ace Hardware Store, okay? They've got an existing system that we're not going to come in and monitor. But yet I can put some alerts throughout their place where they can push a button to know where somebody is in that store, to be able to, they can get a text or an email right away to say, somebody's over in this area, to go over there to get them. That's a total separate standalone alert type system, even though it's now they're paying us a monitoring fee, they're paying us an interactive fee, but they just made a separate standalone type of unit that way. And it's how you think about that alert system. It doesn't have to just be security. It's not just your fire. It's another type of an alert system. Or again, it's a management tool. And as you get to know your customers, you're going to know which of those examples there are. And I think on the right there, you'll see some examples. It doesn't matter what type of system that they've got installed sometimes, you still can either trigger an output from some of their devices to trigger some alerts that are already existing there to be able to give you that information. But you've got to think about some of those customer examples, and we'll get to some of those here in just a minute. And here's a lot of examples of what those outputs are. Just a plunger button to say I need some notification as to what's going on. Or I can have I can have a fob in certain areas of a facility to say, hey, somebody just came through a door, or there's something of concern. And one button may give a certain type of message to everybody to do something in that facility, versus another button may say, go to the cafeteria, where the other button may say, go towards the back entrance of the building, to let somebody know what's going on. But you can make these alert notifications via wireless devices or different trigger points. We have some customers that are in the paint business for aircraft. And I remember when they called me one day and they said, we have about 12 freezers that the warmest they get is 180 degrees negative, and the coldest they get is 200-300 degrees, and they need to know if they get warmer than 180, and they need some sort of a device to notify them once that's happening. So we know from a central station perspective, the old-fashioned way is I could certainly put that on and put that in my central station to let them call them or take an action. But now using interactive services, I can just make that be another output, and it can go right to somebody's text or email or call and let them know, even without getting a central folks involved. Certainly HVAC units, we've done that for years on both residential and commercial before somebody even starts to cut the line or move the device. So for the copper theft, that's something we've done well before the newer devices that I've seen that have come on the market to let you know things like that have happened. UPS systems, we've monitored those for years. Again, those are the things that we've brought from the central station notification to now using the interactive services to give you that notification. Lock and unlock doors. We have, as I mentioned, I love access control. So now we've found a few different niches, probably about 4 now, that somebody can't necessarily afford the full access control system and have it managed by us like we like to do, but now they want a door that they want to be able to lock or unlock themselves. Or they want to be able to say, hey, I'm going to disarm, and when they disarm their system, it's going to unlock their front door. Small little commercial application. They're not giving any employees any keys, and now when they go to arm the system later that night, it can automatically lock. Or that person can remotely change how that's going to be. That's just a normal lock that we're all familiar with. That'll be at the show floor tomorrow, so it'll work with any one of those. Certainly in the light commercial market, lights. Lights have now become one of those, and I did with my old building. When I armed that system, all my lights went off. I wasn't waiting on the employees to see if they let the bathroom lights on or the hallway lights on, but it would just shut all that down. And when you get a small proprietor that's sitting there dealing with energy management, look at the cost of energy. We know the rest of that story, but it's bringing that into the commercial application to get somebody to think about how can you help me save that money? Or how can you help me manage this facility? Because in some cases, somebody's just moving from their home to now having their first office space. We run into those. I have a new janitorial service that just got all the Verizon accounts in the Southeast. So this is their first move from their home to having a corporate office. So this is completely new to them. How do I deal with this? What do I have to do? Examples of starting and stopping machinery are obvious, that you can have different safety triggers that can happen. Other control devices. Well, certainly, I'm going to guess from the light commercial, everybody's got camera systems out there. Where can I interactively? We're upgrading more DVRs all the time nowadays, just by talking about, well, with today's technology, that DVR that's 3-5 years old, cost factors have come way down. I can take that out into your smart device, smart tablet, let us get those ports open, and you can manage that remotely for yourself. Here's some examples of certainly a lot of the vertical markets. We're in many of these. And of course, the extent of what we're doing is kind of varied. We've talked about each one of these in depth just to start to have that communication. Because if we don't talk about it, then we're not thinking about what those applications are within each one of those. And I know I left some of those up there because I know we'll never touch them. That's not the realm of what Loud Security is going to go towards. But it's certainly one of those, as you guys look at this and think, that may be what your right space is in developing what those key opportunities become. So whether it's, asset movement, door prop, some door's been open too long, or some door, you don't need an access system anymore as much as I want them to, but there's using the interactive opportunities, I can tell how long a door's timed out. Water, we talked about, you guys have heard from water temperature alerts. Was that another one earlier that you guys have, wind alert? No, what is it?
Wind alert.
Yes, I used to use a lot of wind alert. That's right, in that class earlier. But to me, it's a matter of where do you take that existing customer, and where do I get to go back now to my existing base? And I know years ago, we weren't even dealing with fire back then. So it's a matter of us going back to say, hey, we've already got a system there. What can I do now that I'm talking to new customers about, but I'm sitting there with my 6,000 plus customers that I haven't even shared or brought this to because we haven't marketed to them or haven't revisited them. And I really feel like it's a great win-win that we get to kind of solidify that relationship for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. And with that, I'm going to leave that for us to get to Avi and some of the others, and I know we'll have some question time.
Why don't we take some questions for you before we move on to the, anyone have questions for John? So a lot of what we heard about was taking things that used to be managed through a central station and turning them into direct alerts.
Yes.
As a big recurring revenue source.
That's certainly one that we took away from the central, but it's even more thinking of making that more of our common language of discussion. How about that? That became more of our sales platform, and I think it becomes that trained professional that we're selling ourselves, not even that you're going to buy that, but it's at least making you think, and we're coming in a little differently than maybe what that other person's coming in at. Even that ADT sales guy, he may be coming in and say, here's the system I want to sell you, but we're getting you to think about all these other ideas that you may not be considering. So even if I fail and I only get the services that I really was going to sell to them 3 years ago, okay, I lose. Okay, yep, but I really get the job. But I've at least created that partnership from the commercial relationship for that future as they grow. Or at least they had to think through some things about what their tomorrow entails when they hear that next piece of news or that sprinkler head pops or something develops. John, one other thing, and this is all about reoccurring too. The other thing that we created was the life safety facility manager. So I want to be their life safety facility manager. I don't do sprinkler systems, I don't do fire extinguishers, but you know what? We bundled it all together. So we're going to either partner with whoever they already use for extinguishers, whoever they already use for sprinkler system, use their same provider, but we're going to be their life safety source and their facility manager to be able to say, we're going to schedule all that. And now they're billing all that through us, and we're going to make that call schedule. They don't have to worry about a thing.
Can you talk a little bit about that small business customer that you couldn't sell the full-blown access control system to, but you sold them some simple door control? Was it a Z-Wave enabled lock,
Yes.
Just like you do on the residential sector?
Exactly. Yes. And because we know our access product, and I want to stick with what we know well. So when we do, and somebody wants us to come in with, I don't know the IEI product line, okay, and I chose not to know it because I didn't want to get into that single door space. So many times through the years, we would kind of walk from that. That was just not our real niche, and to go figure it out to help somebody because they were on their financial budget. Well, now guess what? This whole thing opened us a platform for them to have the alarm system with the lock. They couldn't afford the real full access, full managed system with the right software to deal with the rest of the platform. So this had us start to keep a customer that we were walking away from in the past. And it's been,
What kind of RMR are you getting on that, and what is the kind of company that where you're landing at?
it's either a company that's just saying, hey, I only want the IT room, or I only have some tools that are going to be in a certain locked room. It's all a specific room. You know, when you're listening, give me a layout, give me your concerns, give me, you know, we're here to talk to you about your security needs. What are some of those issues you've got? So I think if you listen, there's a particular room where I normally would go to access, and I give them the access pitch. Well, they bought into it. They love that idea. But then it may not be, again, I go now from a price option to say, hey, where do I go from there? And that person is usually going to be in the $40 monthly. You know, whereas before I had the management, the maintenance, and the monitoring, so that monthly fee was considerably higher. So it's not just here's my security monitoring with, let's say, cellular, but then I'm adding interactive, but they'll get to manage it. They get the notifications. They can go in and make the modifications as to who gets the alerts or how much or what the frequency, or is it just about a door prop? Because it may not even that they have to lock or unlock that door, but now it may be that if this particular door is propped, and that was the smoker door, and it's the back of the facility. You know, they would have never known that before, but now with interactive, now they get to know that.
Super. I think we should, with all that discussion of door, let's move on to Peter.
All right. All right, well, we've kind of moved, John talked a lot about from the service side of things and kind of a consultative approach to looking at the delivery of services for a particular customer. What I'm going to talk about in the next couple minutes is from a product standpoint, how we can pair that with the right product offering. Because again, I think as you look at light commercial, as you look at small business and SME, it's not that the requirements are vastly different than the enterprise space. It's really more the scale. What we'll take a look at in a minute is a typical medical building, small medical clinic. Just in the last few months, there were a number of data breaches at small medical facilities. So this is any kind of small medical clinic, community-based. There was one that just lost 2,400 patient records because an outside staff, an outside cleaning staff, came through and stole those records, and off they went. There's a number of small rehab clinics on the West Coast where the paparazzi are always trying to find out who's in rehab this week. They found someone who was willing to oblige and give them some records about someone famous in that particular rehab facility. Each of those records, each single document, is a $30,000 HIPAA violation. So when you're talking about 2,400 documents going out, that could shut down that medical facility. So when we talk a little bit about what it takes to kind of create that business case to deliver commercial type solutions into the light commercial space, you can think of it from the standpoint of the cost of not doing it could be far greater than the cost of doing it. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. Historically, the way we have put systems together with access control has been a few, maybe 5% or less of the perimeter doors being looked after. All the interior doors, let's say 95% of those interior doors, are all mechanical brass keys. But now those light commercial customers are looking at, well, okay, security is kind of, we've got that put to bed. How can you help me deliver my services to my customers, either better, cheaper, faster, or reduce my liability? And so we'll take a look at how we can do that. There's a number of different solutions from the high end of the spectrum, what you might put into a government building, all the way down to what you might put in a residence. But there's a whole host of solutions in the middle. There's kind of a void there, if you will, between those different solutions. And one of the things that we look at is tailoring different solutions based on the infrastructure that customer might have and based on the needs that they have. So when we take a look at a small business customer, we take a look at a light commercial customer, each of them is going to operate differently. If it's a retail type shop, they're going to have different security concerns around shrink. If it's a medical facility, they might have a different set of concerns around controlling documents, cabinets, where they might be moving patient drugs, where they might be moving consumables into a room where they can deliver services. So we kind of have to look at what it is that's driving them. Are they looking simply at managing keys, adding a little bit of accountability and auditability around a brass key type system? I mean, that's something that we can do at a very low level. At least it's something better than just having a key ring out there, no idea who has copies, no idea who has masters. We see a lot of folks who want to manage individuals to a point. We see a lot of keypads going in, but as I'm sure you've seen, people start to write those keypad pins on the door next to the pin pad, or you see pieces of tape stuck around. So again, it's a kind of a low level of security, but better than nothing. At least there's some audit. When you move up into providing access control at that level, where you can have credentials, where you can have fobs, where you can have whether it's NFC or Bluetooth or biometrics or a whole host of different credentialing strategies, then at least you can tie, from a forensic standpoint, who, where, when. And it's from this point that we can start to look at the infrastructure. When you're talking about service delivery, you're pretty much moving out of the offline arena and into the wireless or online arena. A lot of systems are focused on a kind of a passive, sensor-centric approach to where the system is pretty quiet unless people are approaching those different sensors, and then they're reporting back to the mothership what's going on, who, where, when. But we can also create wireless but online systems to give an active level of, if I need to lock something down, if I need to change my security posture, if I need to change the behavior of my building, whether it's something bad that's going on or whether I'm just opening for an open house type of event, have that ability to not only control from the device up, but from the system down. And then we have the ability, at the highest level, to add a level of predictive and preventative management of the system. So not only am I telling it what to do, or am I hearing about what's going on, but I can create some data analytics so that the system itself can be aware of what's going on.
Hey, Peter. Can you go back to
Sure.
the interactive services component and access control? We're really talking about getting to this active level at a relatively modest price point. Isn't that, conceptually where we get to?
I would agree with that 100%. And what I would say is, John mentioned managed services and hosted services. Those kinds of tools, wireless, and the existing infrastructure that these customers already have allow them to get an enterprise type of security at a much reduced price. I think that has lowered the barrier to entry for these customers to be able to get a lot of the solutions that we want to help them get to. So now if we take a look back at this small medical office, there's a number of different solutions that we can bring to bear, depending on what it is that they need to protect. In terms of high security areas where they may have medicines, they may have consumables, needles, etc., we might have online systems launched into that particular area. In locations where they have critical infrastructure and we want to protect that, and there's a lot of different IP-based systems that can connect right into the infrastructure they already have in the building. Low cost, no additional cabling, no additional unique special wiring, and a panelless kind of infrastructure to where you can have the sensors connected directly to software. As we move through the facility and we look at some of the other areas that are maybe less critical, and we don't need to have quite as tight a grip on them, controlled public spaces, perfect for wireless, and to reduce the infrastructure deployment costs, but allow them to have the auditability and accountability that they're looking for, and controlled private spaces. I may have offices, I may have treatment rooms, things of that nature. Again, I don't need to necessarily have an instant lockdown capability because these places may be already locked down by default, but I do want to be aware if there's some sort of off-normal event. And then for areas, even like an area where I may store consumables, or where I may have laundry. You think about this in a medical context rather. You may have biohazardous waste, things of that nature, that you want to just keep people away from. So we can dial that down to a very sort of light access.
Peter, let me share something, because we have several of these exact examples where they did not go access, but they actually went to a lock scenario, where the meds were, the particular facility I'm thinking of, they did not go to the needles or anything like that. But they, it was one of those examples of where I want them to do access, but I could see eventually they weren't. But I ended up picking up an interactive, much higher RMR without losing it was giving them that middle option for me, is what this whole marketplace had created as a difference in the in-between factor. And even some folks from a camera standpoint that may not want to go pay for that full infrastructure or do a lease, be it they're willing to have a monthly fee that gives them just a few, 3 or 4 interactive pieces.
No, that's a great example. Thank you. Now, there's also a lot of movement around the credential. How do I make that more easily deployed, more easily managed, more easily removed, especially if I have a high turn in a particular light commercial setting, which is something that's a little different than your typical commercial. A lot of interest around using NFC and have that credential be able to be provisioned over the air, updated over the air, and removed over the air. So you have people who are coming in with some kind of credential, some kind of phone, smartphone, and be able to bring your own device, BYOD model, give them what they need, allow them to move through the facility securely, but as they leave, I can remove those credentials. Or, hey, if I leave my phone in the back of a taxi, over the air, I can remove those rights and privileges from that phone remotely. So it's another way of adding a remote capability, a service capability, right down to the credential, and being able to have that device operate everywhere within the facility. All right. We'll turn towards the infrastructure now that we need for creating this connection between the service back end and the product front end. Again, we try to, as much as possible, create different avenues to make that communications gap closed. One of the ways we do that is by jumping onto the same infrastructure that a lot of the interactive services are built around. That's Z-Wave and Zigbee. Low power and the ability to jump onto the existing backbone if that's what's there. We also have the capability of tying into, let's say, Power over Ethernet. Pretty much if any office you've walked into, if they've got a Cisco IP phone or any IP phone or any IP camera, some PoE switch is powering that. So the same cable infrastructure, the same structured cabling, the same PoE devices that are providing power can provide all the infrastructure and power that you need without having, through a low voltage type of a deployment, again, be able to deliver access control over what's existing, so reducing that infrastructure cost. Wi-Fi has become a real boon, especially in places that have it already deployed. Where they've got Wi-Fi already in a facility, again, you can go in and deliver a solution without having any infrastructure costs. So this is pretty much the lowest infrastructure cost if they've already invested in that. And then I guess the last one, although it doesn't give you that immediacy, is to be able to deliver an offline type solution where I'm going to be updating either over a hotspot or over the phone or over a card. You can deploy in areas that have no infrastructure, and there certainly are, let's say, telecommunications closets out in the middle of nowhere, or a gate, or some location that doesn't have any infrastructure, or a job site that doesn't yet have even power or any kind of wired or wireless infrastructure. So being able to deliver offline solutions to secure the job site and then rolling them to online solutions.
Something like that is using software to control it?
Yes, so the software would be the management of who has the rights and privileges to go where, and how we actually take those rights and privileges and deliver them down to the end user is through either a key So in some cases, we have intelligent keys where it looks like a physical mechanical key, but it's actually an electromechanical key. It's got memory in there, it's got cryptography in there, and the key itself will be written with a set of rights and privileges of where it can go and when it can go there. When you use the key, you're also writing where you did go. So the next time you plug that key into an online station, up come all the transactions about where you went, and down come all the transactions if there's any changes to rights and privileges. Do that on key, do that on card, and in the not too distant future, do that on a phone as well. Some of the questions that we've had recently from the light commercial space have been around some places that typically weren't very keen on access control. In this particular example, we had a customer who was a quick service restaurant. The kinds of challenges that they had were around people not showing up for work. You mentioned fail to open, fail to close. This is critical. In this particular case, bakery, if you don't fire up the ovens at the right time in the morning, you're going to miss the whole lunch crowd. So that could be a couple $1,000s just that day from not starting up at the right time. So by pairing access control with the business, it gave them an ability to do personnel management. I know that it's opened, I know who's there, and I can move my personnel around the facility in an ad hoc kind of way. Where I might have one manager for 10 locations, that manager can't be everywhere at once. But this is an opportunity, you mentioned tablets and smartphones, to be able to deliver that information directly into the hands of the manager, even if she or he are not going to be at any of those locations in a given day. So what are some of the things that they actually use these solutions for? In terms of putting sensing on freezers, it seems like a pretty block and tackle, something you could do with just a standard intrusion system, but they had never done it before, and so they had all kinds of horror stories of people coming in after hours, having parties in this quick service restaurant at 3 o'clock in the morning, taking food out of the freezer and depleting them. Not only leaving the freezer open, that thing spoiled, but all kinds of things will be walking out of there, and obviously talk about liability. From the front door perspective, again, being able to monitor who's in, who's out, when did they come in, etc., and be able to, on the fly, change permissions, add permissions, grant people permissions through the managed services delivery mechanism. In terms of cabinets, drawers, and lockers, they might have a secured location within that restaurant where they've got liquor that they want to manage and know that only the bartender is opening that up. So there was a lot of learning around what the needs were, but at the end of the day, they weren't buying it for security purposes. For that, they really couldn't quite make the total cost of ownership make sense. But because it allowed them to do what they do better, faster, and more securely, they were able to make sense of it, and in short order, the dollars made sense. And so with that, I'll pass the baton, if there aren't any questions, over to Avi.
Let's keep going with Avi, and just make sure he gets his time, and then we'll open it up.
Nah, nobody wants to hear me talk anyway. I'll switch places with you. So far we've heard from somebody who actually does the work, and we've heard from a company that makes a lot of the devices. What I'd like to talk about are some of the practicalities of getting into light commercial. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to give you like a 30-second background on me. I started out as a residential integrator, and I was for many years down in the state of Florida, and worked for a number of manufacturers in developing residential integration systems. When the recession hit, I sort of took a left turn, and I went into commercial. And I did some pretty extensive systems in hospitality specifically, but in commercial spaces for automation, lighting controls, energy management. And the thing that surprised me the most was not necessarily how similar commercial is to residential, because you hear about that all the time, right? People will tell you, oh, a glass front is essentially just a house with a glass front on. It's got a door, it's got windows, it's got employees, it's got thermostat, it's got light switches in it, and so if you can automate a residential space, certainly you can automate a commercial space. The practicality of it, though, is a little bit different. And those are some of the information I want to give you today is some of the practical differences that you're going to find the first time you walk into a commercial space. Because although it is very similar in many aspects, the things that make it different are the things that are going to throw you a curveball. So let's talk about some potential areas. I've got only a couple of slides because I'm not a slide guy. I like to talk more than I do showing slides. But what we're going to talk about really quickly is lighting energy management, then we're going to talk about cameras. So in lighting and energy control, you've got a couple of key areas that you want to take a look at. Now, when you're talking about light commercial, it's fairly straightforward, right? You're going to have some lights, you're going to have a thermostat, you may have a front door. But the lights are going to be very different. And the lighting systems that you're going to have to deal with are going to be very different. So, first thing, you got a parking lot lights. If you're going to do a whole commercial building, parking lot lights, hallway and stairway lights. People don't realize that in hallways and stairways in a commercial building, those lights are typically on all the time. All right, because there's no light switch for them. Think about the last time you walked through an office building, you saw a light switch on the wall in a stairway. They're not. Fire codes are going to call for those lights to be on a good majority of the time. Not only that, but if there is an emergency, of course, those lights have to be on. And so when you're dealing with fire safety, the exit signs, things like that, they're burning all the time. This is a brand new building, and one of the ways I can tell that is the exit sign that's above that door is an LED exit sign. But there are literally millions and millions and millions of exit signs out there that are still working on incandescent bulbs, and they're burning at 40, 50, 60 watts every day, all day, right? Because if they go off, you have a zone violation. But that device up there is infinitely more efficient than an incandescent bulb exit sign. That's one of the ways that I learned, at least, to tell a new building from an old building is the exit signs. And then there are some municipalities where the exit sign isn't just above the door, but they're also along the corridors. So now you have that many more bulbs to deal with. Well, there's a really great website out there called DesireUSA.org. DSIREUSA.org. And what that website will tell you is all of the federal, state, and municipality money that's available to guys just like you to be paid to replace exit signs, or stairway lights, or parking lot lights. There's real money out there to be able to do that. There's rebate money, there's tax incentives. There are guys out there right now that do nothing but replace exit signs every day. And they never charge the building a dime. They're getting all of their money through government programs. So, now imagine if you take the practicality that these gentlemen have presented to you in access control, intrusion, energy management, and you layer on top of that some real money that you're going to get for swapping out some exit signs. Simple. But if you're going to be the technology consultant, as we heard about before, which is a real great way to ingratiate yourself to your customers, then this is another way that you can show them that you're going to save them real dollars. All right, look at the lighting in this room. Again, you can tell this is a brand new building. You've got low power fluorescents. Look at the lights along the sides of the wall here. When was the last time you were in a convention center that had LED tubes? All right, you can tell it's a brand new building, so they've got all of the lighting efficiencies already built in. Look around some of the office buildings in your areas, and I guarantee they're not going to have as sophisticated lighting systems as the one that's in this building. So there's a real opportunity there.
So does the RMR come in so you can make them replace that bulb?
Yeah.
If it doesn't work yet?
Yeah, I know. That's the maintenance contract that we talked about, right? That they have. I noticed that. And it's funny because it was on about an hour ago. All four of them were on because I was in this room for the last session, and the fourth one was on, and it went off. And I'm wondering to myself, is that like a collection thing? Or is that,
to say that
right, is there an alert that says that that's off? Probably not. But the other thing is you have daylight schemes and you have nighttime schemes. So if you have the ability to control some of these electrical devices, you can set them up for daylight schemes where you can harvest some of the natural light that's in these buildings and take a look and understand the position of the building, which way the windows are facing, if there's a shade or a drape that has to be over that window to control the heat, because then you also have time-based thermostats. So let's talk about some of the differences from residential. The first thing is, look around this room. You've got fluorescents up there. You've got low power fluorescents here, tube lights. You've got LEDs. Imagine if you had to dim these devices. You wouldn't be able to use standard residential systems to dim these devices. You need something a little bit more unique. And there are light switches, Z-Wave enabled and Zigbee enabled, light switches out there that will enable you to dim these kinds of circuits. Now, this is a very complex room, right? This is a ballroom, so I'm not proposing for a moment that you have to deal with this kind of environment in a light commercial space. But think about a showroom. Think about a car dealer. Lots of glass windows, lots of different kinds of lighting, spotlighting for the cars. Clothing stores are very, very big on this. They use halogen to light certain pieces of merchandise. They're using LED because it's a much cleaner light. But in the afternoon, when the sun is streaming through those windows, why are those lights on? This is your opportunity then to set up some schemes to be able to set the lighting based on what the owner of the business wants, based on what he wants to show and what he wants to highlight, but at the same time saving him some energy. High voltage thermostats. Almost all the commercial spaces that you're going to encounter don't use standard 24 AC volt thermostats. They're going to use high power thermostats. They're going to use thermostats that are going to need you to switch 110 or even 277 volt switches and relays. There's only one company that I'm aware of that makes a high voltage communicating thermostat. And because this is a session and we're not supposed to talk about brand names, I won't tell you. But if anybody wants to know about it, you can come up after the session. I'd be happy to share it with you. But that device is unique. And it represents a unique opportunity for those environments where you have high voltage HVAC switching, and you have to switch high voltage in order to turn on different fans, motors, compressors based on your environment. Now, this gentleman here in Georgia probably never has to deal with the heat, but he certainly has to deal with the air conditioning. Other geographic areas, obviously you're going to have to deal with heat, you may have to deal with furnaces, you may have to deal with ductwork, you may have to deal with zones, right? If you're in a strip center and you want to be able to section those places off, you may have one bay that's an office that's only open 9 to 5 and another one that's a retail location that's open 12 or 18 hours a day. And so you want to be able to section those off for the building owner so that he's not heating and cooling the office when only the retail space is open. So there are different opportunities there as well. And that has to do with usage patterns. So, lighting, energy control. Questions before I jump to cameras. Are there questions about lighting, environmental controls, rebates, installation?
Where do you get the rebates?
Where do you get the rebates? Very good question. So, on DesireUSA.org, this website that is maintained, by the way, by a university, so it is a third-party free
Repeat it, please.
DesireUSA.org. It's run by a university in, I believe, North Carolina, but don't quote me on that. And what these people have done is they've made it a study for one of their departments to update all of the local municipalities. You can actually drill down to the county level on this website. There will be links to all of the various websites external to this website of the county, the state, the federal government, and where those incentives are, with clear, concise instructions as to how to fill out the forms, what the regulations are, what type of systems you have to install, what the savings you have to show are, and how to get your rebate. Because unfortunately, there is no one methodology, because this is America and everybody wants to do it their own way. And so each municipality in each state, depending on if you're a blue state or a red state, have different rules and regulations based on how you get that rebate money. So for those of you in blue states, there's more money, right? Those of you in red states, there's less money, sorry. I don't write the rules, but I read the website. So the money that's available to you, though, is payable to you as the dealer, the installer, not necessarily the property owner. Because the form that you fill out, and I've done this many times in the hospitality industry, signs over that money back to you, the integrator, rather than to the building owner. So, we talk about RMR because the session is all about RMR. There are companies out there taking advantage of the savings percentage that they're giving to the building owner. So you may get paid by the federal government to install that parking lot lighting, but then there is an annual savings to that building owner, and you can actually become part of that recurring revenue model. So if they're saving 22%, you take 10% of that 22. And for that, you're going to install this for free. So the building owner does not have any upgraded costs. I know. Build value in. John's absolutely right. Build value in. There's no such thing as free. You're going to install it. They are going to reap the benefit. You are also going to reap the benefit. And now you have a buddy. Now you have a customer. Now you have a partner in the energy management and in the light commercial space. So think of the other services that you can offer to that commercial space. Because now you got your foot in the door. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Before you move on to video, do you do any work with grants helping build an opportunity within commercial for energy management savings, helping provide, like, file a grant to the government.
Actually, this website has a whole list of Department of Energy grants, of third-party philanthropic grants. So if you're dealing in a depressed area, for instance, urban renewal, okay, and you want to build, it's called LEED, the LEED points of a specific building up, there are grants available to you on that website. And again, you have to do a little bit of research because it all depends on what area you want to deal with. So the website will present you with a map of the United States, and you're going to drill down to the state level or to the federal level. And for those of you who are contemplating solar, I know it's not really part of this conversation, but for those of you contemplating solar, there's a whole section of that website about solar installations as well, and the money that's available through solar installations and wind, solar, geothermal, if you happen to be in one of the rare places that geothermal works out.
Is it just the U.S. or is there other parts of the world it's addressing?
It's just addressing the U.S. It is just addressing the U.S.
But I would just add that a lot of the international agencies that are similar to LEED and Green Building Council have the same criteria. So often, if you're going to meet the LEED Gold or you're going to meet LEED Platinum certification, you'll be able to provide services at a level that Canada, Germany, France will.
Canada has a lot of the same rules, and there's a lot of incentive up in Canada for energy savings. They're funneling a lot of the tax money from the tar fields back into energy management for their constituencies. So there is a lot of money out there. There is a website, I'm sorry I don't have it at my fingertips, but there is a website that describes what the Canadian government is incenting, if that's where you're headed. Caribbean, yeah, that's a whole other problem. That's a whole other problem. There are some programs, depending on where you are, but unfortunately, a lot of times those countries are rather poor, and so there's not a lot of money surrounding those. When we used to do hotels down there, that was pretty much the managing company would take the hit because the costs of energy are so high down there. Putting any kind of system in, even at a cost to the owner, is going to save them boatloads of money. This group is probably mostly from I would assume, the southeast and the middle of the country, where energy costs are not very high. Tennessee, for instance, has one of the lowest kilowatt per hour costs in the country because of Tennessee Valley, obviously. Take a wild stab at what they're paying in Hawaii for a kilowatt hour. Okay, it's upwards of 40 cents by the time you're done with all the duties and the taxes. So compare that here in Tennessee, you're in the 6-7 cent a kilowatt hour. So you can see very quickly how some of these energy management things are beneficial to homeowners and business owners in other parts of the country. The coasts, East Coast, West Coast, tend to be much more expensive. So, any other questions, lighting and energy management? We can come back, but before we move on. So let's talk about cameras. So, as Peter described, there are some very sensitive areas within all these light commercial spaces, right? Cash registers, doors and gates, loading docks, other secure areas, IT areas within the establishment that they may want to monitor. And you get a little hinky, right? Because it gets into some of the issues of running cables and things like that, and whether or not it's IP or PoE, or if it's wireless and Wi-Fi, and I'm not going to get too much into that because there are probably 10 different sessions here and 30 different manufacturers downstairs that can help you, or upstairs, downstairs, I forgot where I was. Upstairs, sorry, that can help you answer those kinds of questions that are right for your company and for your technicians. But what I want to talk about here is, let's talk about points of contention, okay? How do cameras differentiate in commercial spaces from residential? Obviously, the areas that you're going to be talking about are a little bit different, but you've got things like edge recording, right? Edge recording is the ability of the camera itself to record the image that it's seeing. And so that may be a little SD card or a little USB stick or something that actually plugs into the camera. Now that's your ultimate backup, right? Because if the cloud service goes down or the DVR goes down or the NVR goes down, it's still recording at the camera level. And that's a good opportunity for you in light commercial. That's something you probably wouldn't do in residential, but it's definitely something you want to do in commercial, because then you're always getting it at the camera level. And if there's a failure somewhere in the system, you know that there's the ultimate backup, which is at the camera. So then you have cloud backups, right? You have redundancy in cloud backups, of course, and there's lots of different services out there to get you to cloud, and you get to charge a monthly recurring fee for that, right? If you're going to host your storage, or you're going to partner with somebody who's going to host storage, there's an RMR opportunity there. DVRs and NVRs are typically local, but again, there are maintenance contracts, there are other opportunities for you to gain recurring revenue based on those systems. Theft-proof cameras. In a residential environment, you're more concerned with the camera blending into the environment than you are a theft-proof camera in a commercial. Things like dome cameras are much more important in a commercial environment because they can't be knocked down as easily. You can't just throw a rope up and pull them down. Right? Whereas cube cameras and others that you might use in a residential, lower cost, right, are much easier to pull down, much easier to damage, much easier to throw something against. And so you have to be careful in the differences, so you have to bring in a little bit different camera than the one that you're probably installing at a front door. And then, of course, there's always the problem of privacy issues, right? When you're filming in a public place, because a commercial building is, in fact, a public place, you have to be sensitive to the areas that you're filming, the areas that you're recording, whether or not the people in the environment know that they're being recorded, and if they know that they're being recorded, that they've given their consent to being recorded. And so this, again, goes back to the consultative sell to your commercial environment, to have those conversations with them. All right? Educate yourself on some of the privacy issues. Keep up to date with some of the trade journals and understand what the privacy issues are, so that when you do install a system in a commercial environment, you can be that consultant for your customer. You can be the expert, because, again, they're going to pay you every month for the maintenance of these systems. You need to be the guy that they go to. You need to be the first phone call they get when they read about a story in the newspaper about privacy issues. You're the one that they come to with that question. Because if you're not, your competition will be. All right? You have to stay one step ahead of everybody else. So, questions about cameras, questions about recording, privacy, things like that. You guys are ready for that beer. It's a beer crawl tomorrow night, right?
Can you talk a little bit about camera applications where an interactive services play, right?
Sure.
I mean, to me, it's kind of a 50-50 blend of security and facility management, or even...
It is. Employee watching, business management. Yeah, there's no doubt.
What's the playbook on that?
So the playbook, there are a lot of cameras out there now that will do analytics for you. And that's really, in the commercial environment, the analytics become really important. The camera will actually know, did somebody cross from left to right or right to left? Okay? The camera will know whether or not there was movement in a certain piece of the frame and can make decisions based on the movement within that frame. And that's really the evaluated service that you're going to bring to your customers, and that's going to enable you to get RMR out of a simple camera install. Most camera installs up until now, because they didn't have analytics and they didn't have that interactive service or the recording capabilities, was a one-shot play, right? You'd go, you install the camera, you get paid for the installation, and you're done. Now, because there are so many more interactive services involved with cameras, the transmission of those signals, the storage of those signals, the maintenance of those cameras, the maintenance of those signals, that's where the real recurring revenue comes in. And analytics play a very big part in that. Because you're now not just taking a picture, but you're taking a picture and you're making a decision. Or you're taking a picture and you're sending that information based on what's happening in the frame. So you may have a loading dock, for instance, where all of the motion is going from left to right, but all of a sudden there's motion from right to left. The cameras now are intelligent enough to know that there's a difference in the standard flow of what's going on within that environment. Interesting one that I saw the other day was there's a camera set up over the Oakland Bay. All right, and the shipping traffic, they know that if the ships are in the top half of the frame, they should be going north, and if the ships are in the bottom half of the frame, they should be going south. Because if all of a sudden a ship in the bottom half of the frame is going north, he's in the wrong shipping lane. There's a potential disaster about to occur. And so the camera is intelligent enough to know that there's a difference in the analytics to send an alert to say, hey, there's a ship in the bottom half of the frame going in the wrong direction. Somebody better do something. Call the pilot, call the Coast Guard, alert the authorities, right? Because there's a problem there. The same thing can be said within a small commercial, environment, right? There's a hallway. Everybody's going through the hallway in one direction, but all of a sudden everybody's coming the other direction, all right? Or there's a line in front of your register. Now, there's no movement in that portion of the frame, but all of a sudden now there's a lot of movement in the portion of that frame because there's a line in front of your cash register. Maybe you need more employees. Maybe something has occurred. Something's gone wrong. So the analytics...
Do you have analytics and business intelligence applications that are priced appropriately for that small business owner?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are camera manufacturers here at the show that are priced appropriately, that are not, we're not talking about $10,000 cameras to do this anymore. You're talking about $300 cameras. Now, $300 IP camera is a little bit more pricey than your average residential $99, $149 play, but you are now going to get lots of business intelligence from that camera. So now, instead of the camera being, the cheap off-the-shelf Chinese knockoff, it's got some, but the Access guys are here at the show. All right, they're one of our sponsors, so we can name them.
What's the IP camera
Right.
going back to?
So the IP camera goes back to a gateway, a server, if you will, and it will send that information, it gathers that information, and will send that information back through an interactive services play. So in the case of some of that server-based technology, what they're actually going to do is they're going to send the information, and you can program the alerts. So you take a section of the frame, and you highlight it using their software. And then if you tell it what you're looking for, essentially. And if it sees what it's looking for, then there are some rules associated with that movement that say, hey, send an alert to these people.
Is it a cloud service I'm paying for?
Typically, it's a cloud service because you're going to store that data at the same time, but it can be server-based. It can be local. It can be local.
And just to go to your question about making the dollars make sense, a lot of retail establishments pay to have a heat map done. Somebody's standing there with a clicker to say, okay, I ran a sale. Where are people dwelling, right? Where are they standing and how long are they standing there? And so they're going to pay somebody with a clipboard to stand there, and they might have a service run for umpteen number of thousands of dollars. To your point, you can now have intelligence in the camera. You can store metadata from the camera doesn't even necessarily have to have the analytics baked into it. It's just going to capture metadata and send it up to the mothership. And you can create that heat map in real time. Now you can go back and say, okay, I spent $10,000 on my advertising. Did it do what I wanted it to do? Did people actually spend more time at the end caps? Did they spend more time in the areas where I had my particular sales going on? If not, something's wrong. Is my pricing off? Did it not get out?
Right. But you get to make the business intelligence decision. Absolutely.
To me, the cool thing about all these technologies that we're talking about for light commercial is particularly that retail application. Where we know the retailer that started as mom and pop one location has always struggled to open up the second and third locations because they couldn't have their eyes and ears there. They couldn't have their watch the cash register, so to speak, but also quality of the services, how people are responding to the offers. So now we have technologies that enable that, and hopefully at a price point that small.
Right, and that's the important part. I agree with you. The price point, the analytics in these cameras these are not tens of thousands of dollars worth of cameras anymore. You're under $1,000 for a very sophisticated piece of video technology, and you really can now drive some RMR dollars because you can, again, the whole idea is the stickiness of your relationship with your customers, right? If you're not constantly meeting with them, if you're not constantly evolving what you have installed, then they're a dead end. So the way that you're going to keep that stickiness is you're going to bring them new technologies, you're going to bring them new opportunities, you're going to bring them new business intelligence to help them run their businesses. And at the end of the day, they're not going to feel bad when they have to write you that check at the end of the month because you're part of their technology partnership. It's very similar to what John talked about when he's walking through an environment and he sees that there's water over the IT department and not foam. Even though he doesn't do foam, the way that he's going to ingratiate himself and he's going to increase his value to his customers is by pointing out things like that. And so it's not just about you making a sale, it's about you becoming that technology partner to your customers. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep them to be customers.
To me, it's just listening to those folks talk about what that, like the heat mapping is a great example of that. It's not something I've come into, but I think if somebody's saying we're putting all these new POS systems up there, and this whole new design, and we want to know the effects, but of course it comes down to that person that's going to invest to say, well, hey, here's an idea of a solution for you using analytics or whatnot. Because it's amazing to me that you watch them open these franchises, but yet there's no money for blah or blah.
Right.
And it's that struggle sometimes. Nowadays, of course, everybody wants to know what the temperature in that freezer is, because the ice cream shop, when that freezer goes bad, there's no ice cream, or the meat locker that's got this. So, nowadays they know to invest in that, but it's those different steps. I think you had a question.
We're getting into, a lot of these manufacturers in the camera industry have, the software has open APIs on the back end. Where even non-sophisticated integrators can reach out to development communities and say, here's my idea, I need this to do this. And as an example, we built an application for under $1,500 that we sold for over $15,000 for the first camera.
Yep.
And now we have an opportunity, an application to go at port authorities all around the country.
And you are absolutely right. The boom in this country is all of the college kids who want to build open source applications, right? It's one of the untapped resources that we have as a society, actually, is all these guys that want to build these open source applications. They want to build connectivity because it's cool, it's relevant, it's easy, and they're not charging an arm and a leg for it. It's not like the old days where to develop a piece of software was $1 million. With these open applications, a lot of the stuff almost builds itself. And so there are lots of opportunities out there. If you're lucky enough to be near a tech school, tap into that. There's a lot of talent out there, a lot of guys that just want to play.
And it's amazing when you find those certain niche developments like those, and then you can take and run with that. I mean, we did 10 plus years ago with subdivisions, pools, tennis courts, clubhouses. And once, the board doesn't want to manage an access system, but they want everybody to pay and limit people coming in and so forth. And once we started to design systems, and then those management companies would just refer you once again over and over, and they don't want to manage the systems.
Right. And don't overlook the idea of interns. If you have universities, you have technical universities near you, you are technical companies, okay? It's very easy for you to go to these universities and hire interns for the summer, and these kids are brilliant.
We got the Department of Transportation caught wind of what we were doing. They want to send us leads because they get tax revenue on the ships coming into the ports. And they're cheating us. They want the systems on.
Exactly. No, it's a great opportunity. It really is. It really is. How are we doing on time?
We've got 2 minutes. Any other questions? All right, off to Lower Broadway. Let's thank our panel. Great job, everybody.
Thank you.